We were just talking about romance and consent and marriage. Well, marriage is getting an overhaul even as you get into marriage. Tiffany is releasing their first ever men's engagement rings. So, typically for those youths in the audience or those people who have remained single, who have been living under a rock, when you get married, what happens? The man goes out and buys a ring, and he proposes marriage, and the woman either accepts or smacks him across the face and says no, and then she puts the ring on, and then you go get married. And then you can, now both parties wear a wedding ring, though that wasn't always the case, but only the woman wears the engagement ring. Well, that's changing. I have had, so I've got to watch my words here. I've had some liberal friends of mine who are men engage in this process already. The men have worn an engagement ring because they say, well, if the woman wears an engagement ring, I should wear an engagement ring too. Because men and women are exactly the same and completely indistinguishable. So, of course, whatever the woman does, the man has to do. Whatever the man does, the woman has to do. Okay, I don't agree with that approach, don't agree with that anthropology, but I understand it. I understand the reasoning there. Now, Tiffany, by coming out and saying, here is a men's engagement ring, they are taking this beyond a sort of personal eccentricity and saying this could be a new social tradition. This could be a new aspect of proposing. Now, the men's engagement rings, it's called the Charles Tiffany, and it includes emerald cut and round diamonds up to 5 carats. So I don't know, you'd have to be pretty blingy here. Who is this aimed at? For the straight fellas in the audience, would you wear the Charles Tiffany engagement ring? Probably not, right? But I don't think straight guys are the audience here. Maybe some feminist guys who think that men and women have to do exactly the same thing. But I think it's probably the reason for this is because we have now, from the Supreme Court, redefined marriage to include not just monogamous unions of husbands and wives, but also monogamous unions of the same sex. And so because of this, if you're a man proposing to another man, it's a little, who's going to do it? Which guy is going to do it? If you're now saying that we are going to redefine and expand the institution of marriage to include monogamous same-sex unions, it does raise a lot of questions. Because sexual difference has always been important to marriage, it's always been at the heart of marriage, even just at the basic question, who's going to propose the marriage and who's going to accept the marriage, you have to try to work that sort of thing out. And who gets the ring and do we both get the ring? This is the one area I've pointed out on this show, and other conservatives have pointed this out too, that the transgender ideology undermines the homosexual rights ideology. And it undermines them because gay rights is very simple, right? We're born this way. Some boys like girls, some boys like boys, and there's really nothing we can do to change that desire, so society should be more accepting of that. Okay, totally understand that. And then the transgender ideology comes in and says, actually, there's no such thing as boys or girls, and boys can become girls and girls can become boys, and everything's mutable. Well, that so much for the born this way, so much for the you can't change that, so much for the orientation, that undercuts it. But there is one area where the two link up, and that is on the redefinition of marriage, because if the argument for the redefinition of marriage, which you saw from the Supreme Court, is that M plus W equals M plus M, then M has to equal W. They have to be indiscernible. They have to be exactly the same. And if that is the case, then you're going to see a lot more social rituals, such as the Tiffany men's engagement ring. You're going to see a social push to take away that which is particular and peculiar to men and that which is particular to women. And it's all going to have to be the same. But anyone who's ever been in a marriage knows that it's not the same. I've got my cute little newborn kid at home. Could I nurture that kid? No. To a degree I can. I can play with him, I can kiss him, I can say, hey buddy, and I can have a nice time, and I can even give him a bottle every now and again. But I cannot provide for that baby what sweet little Elisa can provide for that baby. Because sweet little Elisa is a lady, and I am a grunting, knuckle-dragging brute, and the relationship of a baby, of any person, to his mother is different than the relationship to his father. And that's the way it is, and no amount of social engineering is ever going to change that. And by the way, for the gay guys in the audience and ladies too. I don't want to exclude the ladies here. I have had many of my gay friends tell me that when they are in a relationship, the gender roles sort of come out there too. Some guy is a little more like the traditional guy. Some guy is a little more like the traditional girl in the way they interact, in the way they cook, in the way they whatever. Because those things come from nature, and then civilization has developed them. So of course, there is a social aspect to our sex, just as there is a biological aspect. But those two things are connected. And in this culture, if we're going to just deny that entirely, then things are going to go a little bit kooky throughout all aspects of the society. And we can make ourselves feel better and say, it's all just private. Michael, what do you care? What do you care? Getting back to the inciting incident here. What do you care if Bill and Melinda Gates get divorced? I care quite a lot. I care a lot if anybody gets divorced, because that's people breaking their contract and their pledge, not just to one another and not even just to God. I suppose that's between the parties involved there, but they're breaking a pledge to me. They're breaking a pledge to society. They're breaking a pledge to their children. They're breaking a pledge to the whole culture that they will do their part. And I know it's a fallen world and these things happen. But the question is here, are we going to encourage that sort of thing, or are we going to discourage that sort of thing? And the argument made not just by the left, but made by the right now as well, because the right has adopted the ridiculous libertine redefinition of the whole culture that the left has foisted upon us. This is, by the way, the topic of my upcoming book, Speechless, Controlling Words, Controlling Minds, available now, by the way, for pre-order. Because we've adopted that language, we don't have any philosophical tools at our disposal to argue for the conservation of culture. We can't do it. That's why we don't conserve anything. That's one of the reasons why we don't conserve anything. Hey, stop right there. You, before you go, need to ring that bell. I know what you're thinking, Michael. Michael, the decision of whether or not to ring that bell, it's a private decision that I should make, and me alone. No, it's public, buddy. It's public because we put these videos out and then you might not get the notifications. So you've got to do it. I'm telling you. Go ring that bell. Subscribe. Like. We'll see you next time.